The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 157.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Voyager episode, Cathexis. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. And retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments in both places. We love to hear from you. Yeah, so this is Cathexis. It's a first season episode, jumping back and forth from the first to the fourth season. And this is the 13th episode of the first season. And so let's talk about the title, Cathexis, because the word's never used in the episode. I looked it up, and it's a psychoanalytical term meaning investment of mental or emotional energy in a person, object, or idea.
Right.
Any clue what that has to do with today's episode?
Well, there's mental energy that's involved in this episode. They call it bioneural energy, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, the energy is invested in people, I guess, by going into them and taking them over.
I feel like Brandon Braga, who wrote this, he was reading a magazine and saw it and said, "That's a cool word. I need to incorporate that into an episode of Star Trek Voyager something."
I will say, though, Dom, every time you say that word, Cathexis, I want to say, God bless you. Yeah. It sounds like you're sneezing.
Gesundheit. Right. Why don't you do the recap, and then I'll get into the weird things that we start with.
So, Chakotay and Tuvok return to the ship on a shuttlecraft. Tuvok says they were at a dark matter nebula where they were attacked by aliens. Chakotay's bioneural energy has been drained, and he is brain dead. To help Chakotay, Voyager starts to go back to the nebula to find a way to heal him, but weird things keep happening that stop them from getting back to the nebula. The crew deduces that an alien consciousness is temporarily possessing people and causing them to sabotage the ship, and this leads to a game of paranoia. Eventually, it's revealed that there are two entities possessing people. One is an alien that wants to get Voyager into the nebula so that the aliens that live there can feast on everyone's bioneural energy. And the other entity is Chakotay, who knows what's what and is trying to stop them from going into the nebula and being feasted upon. In the end, the alien is defeated, Voyager escapes from the nebula, and Chakotay's consciousness is reintegrated into his brain.
Very good. That actually makes it sound like almost like an interesting episode.
Yeah.
All right, so what I was going to talk about was this teaser, which I gratefully didn't mention because it doesn't really have anything to do with the actual story. And that's
right.
The weird part of it, is you have this teaser where Janeway is in a holonovel set in ancient England, quote unquote, Victorian or Regency England of the 19th century of some sort, where she's playing a governess for a widower. And I'm like, what is the point of this extended scene?
Filler.
I mean,
It has nothing to do with the episode. It's just filler because the main plot isn't interesting enough to sustain the whole episode. And so we get this, historical fantasy thing that's incorporating elements of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Henry James's The Turn of the Screw.
Okay.
So if you're a fan of, it's obvious a mile off that, that her character is meant to end up married to the Lord of the Manor, but his supposedly dead wife is living on the fourth floor of the house and at some point will break out. And it's like, yes, if your wife is a fan of this period literature like mine was, then you've seen these tropes before. The governess coming in, the initially distant but ultimately romantic and misunderstood lord of the manor, and the crazy wife in the attic.
Right. So, yeah, I guess there was... This comes back again later in the season, I'm pretty sure, if my recollection is correct. But it was apparently supposed to be... They had this idea of having Janeway doing an extended holonovel through the season.
Right.
And the original idea I was reading was that it was going to be set in the Wild West, and that she was going to be a pioneer woman with her family, far from home in situations she was unprepared for. A little on the nose there.
A little definitely on the nose there.
But it was abandoned. That idea was abandoned because Kate Mulgrew wouldn't work with horses.
And they realized how much it would cost them to have all the location shooting and the horse wranglers and bringing in a whole other cast of people to play her family every time they wanted to do this. And frankly, this would be much more interesting. The Victorian novel would be much more interesting than the Wild West thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Personally, I think when they get to Leonardo da Vinci in the fourth season, that's much better.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think they finally figured out how to do the extended holodeck story that complements in a better way then. Not perfectly. I mean, Haven is kind of interesting, but
Wait,
it has
the
problems.
Irish thing? No, I hate that.
Yeah.
That's awful.
Okay. There were some things that were okay, but it had its issues, but there were some things that were okay. The best thing about Haven is that the set, the Irish village, I know we're not talking about Cathexis, she tells you how bad the episode was. The best thing about Haven was the set was the one that they ended up using again in The Good Place. That's what I love about that.
Uh-huh.
It's the same set.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same set.
That.
So
anyway,
it was a story of set redemption.
Yeah. Right.
It's incidentally the Simpsons. So I kind of like this idea of having a holonovel within the show that we see pieces of.
Right.
The Simpsons actually did something similar to that over many, many seasons. And it's not obvious because they don't have a holodeck on The Simpsons. Mm-hmm. But what they do have is the Arnold Schwarzenegger stand-in McBain.
Yes.
And it was revealed after many years that fans discovered if you take all the clips of the McBain movie we see, they actually string together to form a semi-coherent plot.
Oh, that's funny. That's
yes,
awesome.
yes. Things you can do when you are on for 30 years.
Yeah.
So, as you said, Jimmy, the Chakotay's brain has been drained of all the bioneural energy. Is that even a thing? Is that a plausible idea?
It's scientifically, it's beyond. It has nothing to do with modern science.
Okay.
It's not a soul because it's bioneural energy, so it's an empirical phenomenon.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about how does our brain work on the level of real world physics, there's no such thing as bioneural energy. The neurons in our brains run electrochemically, but there's nothing distinctively biological or neural about that energy other than the fact it is in a biological system in the neurons. But it's still ordinary chemical and electrical energy. So it's not a distinct type of energy. And if you drained it all out, whatever that would mean, you're basically saying he's not just brain dead, but he's dead because his brain would be chemically and electrically inert if you stop all of that from happening.
Well, it's the same energy that keeps the heart beating, that keeps the muscles firing, that does all that stuff. Right. It's all part of the same neural network, if you will, in our bodies. And you drain it all, it's all gonna be dead. His heart's not gonna be going anymore.
It kind of treats the body like the electrical energy in our body like a battery. And we've drained the battery. I guess. Right. Yeah. So if you just recharge him, stick him into the USB port and recharge him, you should be okay.
More technobabble from Star Trek by people who don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, really, it's what it is it's a scientific surrogate for the soul because you want his consciousness to be able to float around and take over people and do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I'm not gonna put too much on it, but
by the way, notice also the inconsistency here because the goal of the aliens who we're told are the Komar, even though they shouldn't have a word since they're in English
non-corporeal.
for them, since they're non-corporeal.
Yeah. Right.
Like, how do you say that with your non-corporeal lips? But they want to eat everybody's bioneural energy. That's why they want to get the Voyager in. And yet, Chakotay didn't get eaten. They got it. They got his bioneural energy out of his body, but they didn't eat it. So what's up with that?
Right. It's not. There's no logical plot reason for that. They just needed to have. It's a plot device. We needed to have him free in order to push the plot along. So yeah, it's a flaw.
When they first got to the nebula and they're starting to go inside it, I thought, oh, they're going to have the aliens possess everybody.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll have a reason for that, like they want to get back at their enemies, but they need a physical ship to do that or something. But they didn't end up going that way. They just want to eat.
Mm-hmm. Well, so
Voyager's a traveling space brain buffet.
There you go.
Well, I had a problem with that too, which is that we were told that the Comarch can't survive outside the nebula, except for the one in our friend Tuvok, the one which was able to get out of the ship. By the way, when they get to the nebula and get out of the shields to join his buddies, but can't get back in through the shields. Like, why did he leave? There's all these, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how does it survive outside the nebula? Well, reasons. How does it get out? Reasons. Why does it get out?
Some of that they could have patched with dialogue. Like, they could have said, if instead of saying we can't survive outside of the nebula, he could say we can't survive permanently outside of the nebula, and one word would take away some of those problems.
Right. Yeah, they just didn't bother.
Yeah. By the way, this is a bottle show, so we have the whole thing is set on Voyager. There is no external stuff except for special effects shots, like from the screen and so forth. And this has one of my least favorite tropes of Voyager, which is just pandemic on the show. The climax amounts to people standing over consoles talking dramatically.
Right.
But you have Janeway leaping to her chair to set off the magnetron pulse, which a magnetron pulse would be a magnetic force, I guess.
Yeah.
That happens to flash lights and everybody gets stunned and it knocks the aliens out, I guess.
Oh, by the way, also notice how similar this is to the Next Gen first season episode, Lonely Among Us, where they pass a nebula and there's an energy consciousness thing that gets on board the ship and ultimately starts possessing people and jumping around and ultimately gets in control of Picard.
Yeah. Right. It wasn't...
Another really bad episode.
Yeah.
Wasn't there an episode we just did where Harry Kim was in sickbay the whole time, or was that the fourth season episode?
Well, there's the one where he had the alien booger,
the
thing.
lo mein up his nose. Yeah.
Right. It's like it always seems like it's someone's turn to lay in the sickbay for the whole episode. It's like a vacation week for them.
One thing I will say though, I prefer Lower Deck's handling of the alien spear that comes in, the energy spear where was it Mariner basically crushes it so that she can get the cool new tricorder with the battery.
Right. That's right.
And then ends up getting destroyed anyways. I prefer that coverage of it. That was better.
All right, let's talk about the religion in this one, because the only accepted religion on Voyager is Chakotay's Central American religious beliefs.
Only human. We get some Klingon religion too.
Oh, that's right. We do get that. Yes.
Barge of the Damned, one of the best episodes.
Yeah.
That actually is really good. I did like that. So so we have this was it medicine wheel set up in the sick bay by B'Elanna, because
and that's a sort of real thing.
Yeah.
Sort of. And this is my pet peeve, and I warned the Dom and Jimmy that I was going to rant on this. This is not Native American spirituality. It is a trope of Native American spirituality. And, Dom, you said, kind of Central American, and maybe. Right. Now, admittedly, I'm more familiar with Northern North American Native American tribes, from up in my Montana. Because I'm up in Montana and North Dakota, where they come from, like the Sioux tribes and places like that. However, it turns out that all this is bogus, because the guy who was the Native American expert, he claimed to be of American Indian ancestry. His name was name given was Jamake Highwater. Boy, that sounds really Native American. His real name was Jackie Marks, and he was of Eastern European descent. He had absolutely no Native American background whatsoever. He was a fraud, but he was able to be the Native American expert on Voyager. So if you watch this and you know anything about, at least again, North American, Native American spirituality, and it sounds bogus, that's because it is.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is a problem actually that many people of Native American background are very critical of, which is non-experts in their religion claim, and there are, by that I mean, depending on the group you're talking about,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
because they don't all have one religion.
No.
But there are these people who are non-Native Americans, or at least non-experts, who then claim to be teaching people Native American beliefs, and they're making it up and they're getting it wrong, and it's kind of sort of maybe based on stuff that somebody believes.
Yeah.
And the term for those people is plastic shamans.
Right.
Because they're not real shamans, they just portray themselves as shamans, but they're plastic. And sort of the ultimate plastic shaman is Carlos Castaneda, who you can hear about and his amazing death cult in episode 132 of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World.
Good episode. That was a good episode. Yeah, it always felt, all of the like Chakotay religion stuff always felt like it was all so indistinct. So what is this sort of nonsense? It felt
what is Chakotay's tribe? I mean,
Right.
just say what his tribe is descended from, and then use that to explore that culture instead of making up this fake stuff.
Well, and I think they kind of hand wave at that by saying, well, this is, all in the future, and all the Native Americans have left the Earth and they're now on another planet, and so the tribe's broken up. No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't break up their tribes. They would have. I mean, I could see something like that happening in the far, far future, that, the Native Americans decide we're done with, these reservations and all that. We're going to go off to colonize another planet. Fine. I could see that.
Some,
but they would still stay in their tribes, because they've been living on reservations for over 100 years now, almost 150 years in some cases, and they still keep their tribes today. Again, this is in North America, this is still United States in particular, but they still keep their tribes. Their tribal identity is very important to them. And there are elements in this episode that I'm familiar with. Vision Quest is a Native American spiritual quest. It's going off, and there's how different tribes do it, different ways. Mm-hmm. But that is a thing. Is it the way they're describing it here? Probably not.
No.
I was sort of a little perplexed by some of the. Now, racial politics is much worse today than it was in the 1990s. But even in the 1990s, there were some odd, SJW type stuff with regard to Voyager. I remember a TV guide describing Tuvok as an African-American Vulcan.
Yeah.
It's like,
yep, I remember
okay,
that.
he's not African or American. He's a Vulcan. He may be black, but he's a Vulcan. He's not African-American.
Right.
But then there was apparently a group of people that were criticizing the casting of Robert Beltran as Chakotay on the grounds that he's not a Native American. It's like,
neither is Chakotay.
Well, no, that's not the. Robert Beltran is of Mexican ancestry. What?
Right.
Mexican Native Americans don't count as Native Americans?
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Well, and if you go with what they're trying to show him as, Mexican, it would be more accurate to Central American natives.
He's got Mayan-looking glyphs on that medicine wheel of his.
Right.
Well, it was funny because there was an Ancestry.com commercial, with the DNA testing, how this woman who was of Hispanic descent was surprised that she was half Native American, half Spanish. And it's like, that's the very definition of Hispanic.
Right.
Okay.
Which is what Robert Beltran is. So that's the very definition. He is Native American descent. Just not the way we think of it, again, in the United States as a person who can, have that direct lineage back to their tribes.
Sure.
And as some people in Mexico say, soy indio. I'm an Indian.
Right.
One thing I did like, though, is that, okay, given that they've got this medicine wheel that B'Elanna is setting up to help guide Chakotay's spirit back into his body, the doctor actually knows how it works better than she does, and is willing to use it. And she's surprised and is like, I'm programmed with all of these medical healing techniques, including ones of a psychospiritual nature. Duh. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, yes, that makes absolute sense. He would be trained programmed in the religious sensibilities of his patients and how to work within the framework of their belief systems.
Yeah.
So he'd also like have a routine. If you've got a Catholic who's in grave danger of dying, call a priest.
Yeah.
Probably.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, there have been medical studies that show people who pray when they're sick have better outcomes and all that sort of stuff. Like he would be trained, programmed in all that sort of stuff. Yeah. We should point out that Cass telepathically senses Chakotay's presence free floating around on the ship. And I remember when watching it thinking, well, why doesn't Tuvok sense this presence? Now it becomes clear he doesn't sense this presence because Tuvok's not home, so to speak.
It wasn't clear to me how much of Tuvok not being home was the case in this episode. I might have to rewatch it to figure out, is he possessed the whole time? But my impression was maybe not.
Maybe Kess. They kept making Kess out to be having more telepathic powers and more psionic powerful than Tuvok. Eventually, that becomes clear,
but less disciplined than Tuvok.
Right. So yeah, we get these things where someone keeps taking control of people's minds. One of the things I did like about this is they turn the tables. They miss the misdirection. Like we are supposed to think early on, and for most of it, we think this floating alien presence is a malevolent alien, like this that it's trying to do harm to the crew, and that's the bad guy in this episode. And they turn the tables on us, and it turns out, no, that's actually the good guy. That's Chakotay. There's another hidden alien among us that we need to throw out the airlock, and that's inside Tuvok. So I think that part is the nugget of something good. Yeah, I thought that was a good idea to do something like that.
In principle, although your individual mileage may vary, the very first thing that happens is, they tell Tom Paris to set a course for the nebula, and he does, and then immediately they reverse course. And it's like, what just happened? And I have in my notes, ship won't go to nebula, Chakotay. Then a few lines down in my note, Kess detects presence, Chakotay.
Yeah.
A little bit down, energy drain, warp core shuts down, B'Elanna, Chakotay. So I was, core ejected, Chakotay. So I from the very first one, I said to myself, they're not going to the nebula because Chakotay is stopping them. And I did not remember this episode from previously.
Well, something similar that I was noticing was from the beginning, at no time do they suspect Tuvok. They completely accept his story of being uninjured by the energy discharge twice in the absence of other evidence until they find evidence of his Vulcan neck pinch on Kess, which I noticed. I don't know why the doctor didn't notice. That's exactly where the fingers go when you do a Vulcan neck pinch on someone. And Kess apparently bruises easily because I've never seen anyone else have bruises, but we needed to see that. So, yeah, it's true. It's sort of, come on, like when you intentionally have to make the crew dense in order to get your plot point across.
Well, they do eventually, have Janeway confront Tuvok and say, could the alien have possessed you? And he goes, well, it's a possibility.
Right, that's true.
It's like, you're the only neck pincher I know on board, dude. So I think it's more than a possibility.
Right. Eventually, we do find another Vulcan on board, but that's not for another season or two. So
yeah.
And
that Vulcan doesn't exist yet. It's like all the shuttlecrafts and photon torpedoes that they come up with later. They run them out of a replicator. Same thing with the crew.
Some kind of Vulcan that we need. Some kind of. I did like Janeway's got an interesting solution to the problem of the alien entity is able to possess people by investing all of the command codes in the one person, quote unquote, on board who cannot be possessed by a free floating malevolent entity, a class 9. I'm trying to think of the Ghostbusters, a class 9 free floating entity, malevolent entity.
There you go.
which is the Doctor. And so all of the command codes go into this program, which can be hacked, which we find out is hackable.
Oh, I love the fact that we then have a ransomware encryption attack on the Doctor.
Yeah.
So, which forces the command codes back onto Janeway. And her solution then is to divide them between people.
Right. Which actually probably was the better solution from the beginning, is any major thing has to be agreed upon by a group of senior officers, I guess.
Well, and that's normally how things work, because there's a lot of those things like, say, self-destruct that both the captain and the first officer have to agree on. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. And, of course, the first officer is out of commission as some kind of non-corporeal alien at that moment.
Right. Well, I guess the point is that she makes more things have to be agreed upon, like course changes and that sort of stuff. So sure. I'll buy that.
Unfortunately, after they do that, they then drop that plot entirely.
We never actually see that in effect, that thing. There was I had to talk about this, one of the crew members who kept getting lines and FaceTime as, I don't know if it was it was Durst, Lieutenant Durst, who I don't know if he ever shows up again, played by Brian Markinson, who is a guy that you don't know the name, but you've seen him in tons of TV stuff. Right. And I kept wondering, is he the bad guy? Like, are we setting him up to be the alien? Or why is he getting all this FaceTime suddenly? I've never seen him on Voyager before. There must be a story. Maybe he was a friend and of a producer, and they got him in there, but he just kind of showed up. Or they were going to make him more show up more often.
That's what I thought, is that he was a second player who would have his own plot someday.
Yeah, they never did anything with him.
Kind of like Seska was.
Right. Yeah, they kind of took her and made her into something. Yeah.
He does come back for one more episode, but then dies. So.
Oh, no, poor Pete. One thing note that I read about when I was looking up this episode is Tim Russ was very invested in being the right kind of Vulcan. And I have to say, after Leonard Nimoy, Tuvok might have been my favorite Vulcan in Star Trek.
That was a show with Bill Bixby, right? My Favorite Vulcan.
My Favorite Vulcan. Yes, exactly. And a little green guy sits on your shoulder. No, that's actually even something totally
That's the Flintstones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, but Tim Russ was so invested in being true to the series lore about Vulcans that he fought an attempt to have Tuvok being blinded by the phaser flash, because it was established in the original series in Operation Annihilate that Vulcans have an inner eyelid to protect their vision from such a thing. And so he fought that. I thought that was interesting.
It's interesting, but on the other hand, just because you've got an inner eyelid doesn't mean you get it closed in time.
Right.
That's right. Although, from what I read, it would have been a similar enough circumstance to what Spock had that it would have been a question. I get it, but I like the fact that he was fighting for these little bits of Vulcan lore for real fan service there.
Well, I get the feeling that Tim Russ is very much a Trekkie. I mean, he's very much into the Star Trek universe, not just as an actor, but even to this day that he very much is a fan of the franchise.
Even doing fan films, of various kinds. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so good on him. All right. Any other notes on this episode, Father Cory?
I do kind of understand Janeway's annoyance at the beginning when she's in the middle of her entertainment, she's in the middle of her Hall novel, and work calls. We all hate when that happens. We all get annoyed when that happens. So I think we can all agree with her on that. So.
And Jimmy, how about you?
So they reference a real-world physics term in this episode, magneton, and they have like a magneton scan or sweep or something they're going to do. What a magneton actually is, it's a unit of magnetic moment in atomic and nuclear physics. So I don't really know how to make sense out of what they're proposing to do on the show. I think they just picked magneton because it sounds cool and vaguely similar to magnet.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have seen in the whatever it is, the galley area, or cafeteria, whatever that area is. And I found myself going, wow, Neelix has a ton of chayote squashes in his kitchen. Those are those little green pear-shaped squashes with the wrinkly bottoms that he's got all over the place. And I guess they were maybe considered exotic looking back in the 90s, but we've got them all over the supermarkets out here in Southern California. And they don't have a lot of flavor, and they're really hard, and you have to boil them for a long time.
Well, didn't you know they're native to the Delta Quadrant? I mean, I thought we all knew that.
I guess so. Also, I saw some commentary on this that was saying that the actors were given some bad direction in terms of how to do some of their performance. And one example of that just leapt out at me was you have this scene where Neelix is in the kitchen and he's been, cooking on stuff, and Kes is there talking to him. And she's explaining that, like, last night I could, like, feel a presence in my quarters. And Neelix is immediately, who was it?
Right.
Like, he's romantically threatened by this nebulous presence, and he's being jealous or something of her sensing an invisible presence. Yeah. And I was glad that they didn't pursue that any further, because it would just feed the Neelix is a jealous jerk, over possessive controlling trope that they've been working with him and Cass.
I really disliked that element in the Neelix character in the beginning. And there's an episode that comes up where he and Tom Paris get in a romantic thing over Cass, under alien influence, of course. And I just never liked that. I just don't like, I don't like that Neelix character element of the jealous boyfriend. It just feels icky.
Yeah.
I did like the way the doctor turned the tables on Neelix's paranoia. Maybe you're the one who's possessed.
Yes. Yes. That was good. All right. That should about do it for Cathexis. Let's take a moment first, before we finish things up, to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Catherine O., KRP, Father Brian Z., Peter M., and Carl S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So what do you think of Cathexis, this Voyager story? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, Shadows of Pajem. Until then, Father Cory Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Shadows of Pajem, that's like a dark My Little Pony episode, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That describes it right there. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, just because a man changes his drink order doesn't mean he's possessed by an alien.